So we'll continue on the evolution of media. You heard about that with Ben Ha. Well, I'll invite someone on stage now who's actually inspired me. So I run this little podcast called The Digital Loop, and he was always telling me that our microphones were sucking, and he actually inspired me to buy new microphones. So I want to welcome on stage Cedric Ingrand.
Hi, Paul.
Bonjour, Cedric. How are you?
Bonjour. Oh, are we switching to French?
No, but I just
that would be my pleasure with a Swiss guy.
Or in Japanese, we could try.
See how you sound better with a good mic?
Oh, yeah.
Told you so.
Here you go.
Hi, everyone. As consumers of media, we have it so good. Media today is in sort of an age of abundance, absolutely fueled by digital. To see how far we've come, maybe in the last 20 years, think of what the future sounded like back in the 90s. The future then was like, imagine TV with 500 channels. That was how we envisioned the future of content. Abundance means choice, and choice is good, right? It also means giving power back to the reader, the consumer of content, the viewer, and that's also good, right? Well, if you're an old, established media company, it's all wrong. It's actually super, super wrong. People used to consume content sort of like at a restaurant based on the menu. You would start with an appetizer, then a main course, then at the end you would have, sports and weather. It was carefully curated, éditorialisé, as we say in French, from headline news to what went after. Now, the menu is gone. We have never had so much food on the table, but except for the information gourmets around us, consumption has moved to what could amount to like a 24-hour Las Vegas buffet that you choose to snack from, or that you consume from with some sort of a, what I call a form of frugal bulimia. You can have as much or as little as you want, because actually it doesn't matter. You still pay the same price, which is usually just attention. Media today as a market is a bit like what music used to be 10 years ago. We have never consumed so much of it, but it hardly brings the revenue that it used to bring. So how can old media reinvent itself? How can new media thrive? What kind of role do platforms play into that? And also all the new formats of media consumption, the shorter ones. These are questions that all of us and our panel is going to have to face. So please welcome to the stage Frederic Filloux, Head of Digital at Les Echos, and half the staff at my favorite digital blog, mondaynow.com. Ben Ha, who's going to stick around, Michael Wolf, co-founder of Activate and former president of MTV Networks. Guys? Doesn't the music alone give you, power? It sounds authoritative. We know what we are speaking of. As you know, the new media guys at some old media, I work for LCI TV, which is like the French CNN. Frederic here works for Les Echos, which is like our homegrown Wall Street Journal. Maybe let's start with old media. We have a lot to cover. Let's talk about, the NYT, all the three letters, the NYTs, the BBCs, the CNNs, and what have you. If you're, say, Les Echos today, how do you adapt to what the landscape is today? I mean, it must get easier. You've had 20 years to adapt to what the web is.
Yes, we had some time to adapt. Actually, we are doing fairly well, because this year it is going to be the first year in 6 years that we are going to pull out a profit, which is something in the news media industry. And today we are also able to announce that our whole circulation is going to be the best over the last 10 years, thanks to digital. Digital is actually accounting for 25% of our circulation. So it has been a boost, definitely. Other than that, we are facing a lot of other issues, including the depletion of advertising. I guess we'll address this issue later. And of course, the readership is shifting. And we have actually been taking two waves. The first wave was from print to the web, and now we are taking a second hit which is the web to the mobile. At this time, the mobile represents 30% of our audience. We expect by the end of next year, it will be close to 50%, which is going to be quite complicated to manage.
So it used to be that readership and revenue were parallel. That's not the case anymore.
Actually, in terms of revenue, I mean, the rule of thumb is that we have lost, if you will, print readers brings 10 more euros or dollars as opposed to digital readers. So we have been taking a hit in that respect. And at this time, we need something like 2 digital subscribers in order to offset the loss of 1 print subscribers.
So, Michael, as co-founder of Activate, you consult for many large media companies. What it is that the old guys are doing right today?
They're finding ways in which they're independent of the distribution platform. So, for example, not just Americans, but everybody in the world is watching more video. And the major producers of video are finding different windows, different outlets. And so you see shows like How to Get Away with Murder, which will be not just on its own television on ABC, but it's going to be on Amazon, it's going to be on Netflix. Each of these shows, each of these different forms of media are actually, they're morphing and they're splitting off and going into so many other places.
Ben?
Yeah, so
you're the new guy. You're the new media guy at this table, of course, obviously.
So I think that's really interesting. The old media has a very problematic constraint, which is the need to generate profits and revenues in order to continue the business. The way we look at revenue at Cheeseburger is it only extends our runway. Revenues are as important because it buys us more time to continue to create new formats, test out new ideas, generate access to new markets, and we'll figure out the rest at the end, because if we're generating revenues today, we'll continue to generate revenues tomorrow. But it's just the mentality that our investors tell us is very different than your investors, which is make sure I get to take some money home. And with us, it's just, can we live to fight another day?
Yeah. I mean, the real issue is it's not about investors. It's really about the audience, about the user. And everything that I do and my firm does looks at this from the user. And if you look at, there's just a lot that's getting a tremendous amount of attention. I mean, you look at Frozen, the highest rated animated film ever.
And is it the 5th highest film in the history of motion picture?
5th highest, and at $1.3 billion in revenue. And you wonder, is the audience interested? And you look at somebody like Katy Perry, and you see a tremendous amount of interest. And so, ultimately, it begins at the same place, which is the audience.
What, if anything, do the old guys do better than the rest of the internet? If I'm, the New York Times, do I still have a real competitive advantage?
They sell ads better.
I'm sorry?
They sell ads much better than the rest of us. They have a long track record. Advertisers, it's an industry still based on trust. There's a lot of momentum to continue to supply advertising for the existing formats. And even though the readership or the audience may be declining, the rates in which you generate from older media is actually significantly larger than what we're generating from new media. We've all been waiting for the day when that thing flips, but it hasn't yet happened.
So you have brands.
Well, actually, I think the split between different types of media has never been greater between the high audience, low yield, and low audience, high yield. If you take BuzzFeed is currently doing 180 million UVs, unique visitors per month, versus the New York Times, which is doing 40. But if you take the ARPU, I mean the average revenue per user, if you take the advertising, you will have a 10 to 12x difference between the New York Times and BuzzFeed. And if you take into account the subscription, the delta will be more like 200 times in favor of the New York Times. So the split is absolutely huge. There is another factor, which is the size and the funding. If you take today, just to give you an example, a couple of years ago, when Le Monde, the French newspaper Le Monde, was acquired by its new investor, it was acquired for 110 million euros at this time. At this very moment, a Flipboard with only 30 people on board was valued at $200 million. And this staggering valuation we are dealing with right now, I think BuzzFeed is valued above $1 billion or something like that. It has practical meanings. It means, for instance, more engineers, more data analysts, but with a factor of 20 times more versus the old media. And I'm used to quote a very funny figures, which is, if you take a Netflix recommendation engine, which is at the core of Netflix, its budget is $150 million, which is exactly the total revenue of Groupe Les Echos I'm working for. It's just to give you an idea of the size we are dealing with. And the problem is that, for instance, with mobile, the same competition is everywhere, because the competition is actually on your mobile phone. I mean, you're working for Yahoo. I consider Yahoo News Digest, which is, by the way, an excellent product, is a complete competitor for all legacy media.
Yeah, no, actually, consumers are finding their news in different places. I mean, the news cycle, especially from newspapers and other media, that's an anachronism. I mean, consumers are looking at this moment, and in a lot of ways, mobile gives them more of an opportunity to look at the news. I mean, look at the number of times somebody will check the weather app on their phone. Look at how many times a day they're checking not just their feed on Facebook, but they're checking different outlets for news.
Okay, but you know the ratio. I mean, in legacy media, which are migrating online, even the best one, if the mobile audience account for something like 50% of their online revenue, 50% of the audience, excuse me, the revenue from mobile is going to be only 20%. The deflation is continuing forever.
I don't know that you can say it's deflation quite yet. I think you saw this when banner ads first came out on the internet. I think it's too early to say what the actual long-term rates for mobile are going to be. And one of the reasons is that the advertising products for mobile aren't very good right now, right? Because they're just adopted from the web, and it's hard to see. I think you need to see innovation in monetization to actually have those rates stabilize to something that is actually meaningful.
That's exactly where I wanted to go. We've had 20 years since the advent of the web to sort of reinvent content for that kind of consumption, and now for mobile. But I mean, anytime something goes wrong at a big media property, you'll have the publisher who will be talking to two people, his editor, and the ad people on the other side, and who will mostly be fighting, you know, your content is crap. Yeah, but you're selling it for peanuts. Does it mean that after having reinvented content, we need to reinvent advertising? Frederic, maybe?
Well, to tell you the truth, in my view, from the news business, the digital advertising is a complete failure. It basically doesn't work. Here in France, I was used to know French property, very high quality French property, having CPMs in the neighborhood of 15 to 20 euros. Now it's down to 6, something like that. And you have, according to a recent study by Google, you have something like 50% of the advertising which are not even seen by the user. There is a huge amount of fraud. I mean, 35% of the impressions are said to be generated by bots.
Mm-hmm.
And the public is massively rejecting advertising. If you take the ad blocks, for example, ad block is making a killing. 140 million users, mostly in mature markets, are actually using ad blocks. For in Europe or in the United States, it's something like 25% are using ad blocks. So, I mean, the whole picture of advertising is really, really degraded, I think.
You know, the problem is this word monetize. I mean, it really is a word that it's way overused, and it really almost sounds like you're exploiting the consumer. I mean, can you imagine saying to a user, we have to monetize you? In a lot of ways,
the term is horrendous.
Right. I mean, the reality is that nothing is really, there's no right. Traditional media have no manifest destiny or right to continue to earn as much money as they did in one format and the other.
That's
and
true.
so it's going to require a lot more innovation, a lot more thinking about different ways in which they can charge. Just a couple years ago, there was this idea that nobody would pay for content on the internet. And now they're paying as much as $15 a month for Netflix. They're paying little less than $100 a year for Amazon Prime. We're going to see a lot more of people paying for content and for experiences on the internet. It doesn't have to be advertising, and it doesn't have to be advertising that's around direct response.
Maybe because the standard up till then was to pay, over $100 for cable every month. So everyone feels like they're getting a bargain, except here we don't pay 100 euros for cable. The latest way of thinking anew as far as advertising is concerned is, native advertising, which, let's face it, for most of it is shit. When you see something that you're not quite sure is an article, at the end of another article, it looks like, enhance your sex life, click here. Some people do it really well. I'm thinking of the New York Times, who is doing it totally differently. It's like building a new glass wall between its properties, and mainly advertisers are sort of bankrolling content that is sort of connected to what their business is, but it's not like, like what we would call a public reportage in France. Is that a good idea? Can it be made better? Can it be made to be sustainable?
You're going to need more than just one type of advertising to make this work. You're going to have to continue to innovate on, is it native, is it sponsored, is it banners, is it programmatic? Like, you will have to tackle and test every single one of those ideas to figure out what's going to work for you, because none of these ad formats are going to make up 100% of your revenue. I would actually venture to guess that it is dangerous for any publisher to rely on one format to generate the majority of the revenue, because if that thing is now passé and all of a sudden people don't want to buy that format of advertising, you're going to be in deep trouble. And you need to diversify within the ad platforms in order to actually make them work against each other.
In a lot of ways, people keep talking about native advertising, and what it looks like is advertising sort of as disguised as content. In some ways, it's better to be able to show the consumer an ad. I mean, so if you look at a pre-roll on video, it's like you've got 20 seconds, you've got 2 ads. I mean, if you look on Hulu, for example, they say you have 2 ads coming up, you know you're going to stop, you know you're going to watch them, and you're going to move on. It's better than sort of disguising it as part of a stream.
Because viewers hate to be misled.
Yeah, I mean, like, look at magazines, right? Like, some of the biggest magazines in consumer markets are filled with ads, and that's the reason why consumers buy those magazines. And we don't have an equivalent today online.
Well, I don't think, first of all, native advertising has to be bad. In the end, I think it has to be decided by the editor. And my blog, The Monday Note, is republished by Quartz, and Quartz is making its money only through native advertising. But they set some rules in which they will have a staff internally which is going to help the advertiser, the agency, the creative agency, to actually produce or co-produce the advertising. And my take is we are going to see more and more what I will call, which is a very bad word, corporate journalism. If you take 2 curves, the first one is going to be the curve, the line of the newsroom depletion. I mean, newsrooms are losing, whether it is in the United States or in Europe, tremendous amount of people every year, every quarter, people get fired. If you take the population of the whole PR and FLAC ecosystem, it's on the rise. And it's going to become more and more competent, my take is, as long as they are going to be able to pay big, fat money to hire great, for instance, business reporters.
Yeah, the good news is they hire from the newsrooms.
Yes, they are going to hire from the newsroom. And ultimately, of course, there is a big danger that at some point there might be some confusion between the paid content, the advertised-based content, and the content which is legitimate produced by the newsroom. But as long as you have a powerful editor which is going to be followed by a equally powerful publishers, I think the matter will be solved quickly.
Yeah, see, I see advertising going in a very different direction. So first of all, I agree with Ben that we're still in a moment where people are experimenting. We don't know what's going to work. We don't know what people are going to look at. But there's also the opportunity, the medium, we have to take advantage of the medium. The medium actually gives you the opportunity to let the user find out a lot more about the products and the services that they're interested in. I mean, I should be able to not just see an ad for a car, but I should be able to see an entire video and select to see an entire video about that BMW I might be interested in. All we have to do is look at how many people have been able to watch a movie trailer. I mean, look at the Star Wars trailer in the last couple of weeks. Many more than would have ever seen it in the past on a television ad or would have ever seen it as a preview at a movie.
And we're not even counting the parodies of the Star Wars trailer. I mean,
absolutely.
Like the number of times a thing that is related to the product has been seen dwarfs the original content, right? You're talking about a world in which people can have a say, and so the marketing of traditional, this is what the product is and believe us, no longer works because you now have to cooperate with, you know, the dirty, unwashed masses of the people that marketers used to think weren't worthy of creating content.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing how few days passed after the release of the trailer. Then there was the one person who actually recreated the entire thing out of Legos. It was amazing how quickly, and they're over and over again. All you have to do is go and look across the web, and you see so many of these.
What's interesting is that there seems to be a bit of an equalizer. Whether you're old media or new media, the only way to move forward is actually to invent new things and new formats, be it on the editorial side or the advertising side. I know your theory, Ben, is that you actually have to sort of own the format, but you know that it's a fickle thing. It'll change in 2 years, so once you own one, you'd better want to know what the next format or the next thing will be.
I think once you start to change your mindset about, you know, creating content, to actually creating formats that other people can participate in, I think that's a skill set that continues to evolve, and that's actually a core competency. And so we're trying to switch our core competency from curation to creating formats. And I think that curation is something that you do that lasts a day, right? You created great content today, what do you have for me tomorrow? Whereas if you're great at creating formats, that's gonna last years, and that's an order of magnitude ROI difference better than what I did before.
I think to some point it relies to innovation, because I think one of the key problems for legacy media is the way they innovate, or actually the way they don't innovate. If you take, I used to take the runway analogy. You take two planes. The first plane is the legacy media plane. It will have turboprop, just enough fuel in order to just take off on a long, long, long runway. At some point it will have 10 degrees above the horizon, and it will go very slowly just with the minimum resources. After a year, people will say, well, it's not working that great, but it's not losing money either. So we are going to continue that way forever. In the startup and tech world, and that's why I'm among the people who try to instillate the tech mentality into the old media industry. I mean, the takeoff is going much shorter. All the resource will be assigned just with one purpose, which is to succeed or to fail, but quickly. And then the takeoff will be much steeper, and the result will be either way better, or the failure will be quicker.
I think
this is a mentality we have to evolve in the legacy media, and to my dismay, it's very slow to evolve.
Yeah, you're like a SpaceX rocket on a good day or a bad day.
I would paint a slightly broader picture than that. So while startups that we hear about have taken off like a rocket, what you don't see is when you're about to take off, all these other plane crashes around you that are just smoking boulders of wasted money.
Yes, but they start over.
That's true. Yeah, nobody dies.
One thing, though, where I mean, tech as a whole and the web has not really delivered on its promise is the old promise was disintermediation. You will be able to reach a global audience directly. It used to be true, but now you have platforms, which are a major, major factor. I should ask Loïc on stage to ask what he thinks about, depending on just one platform. Can you really make a living as a media, as a content company, depending on what the big platforms out there, the Facebooks, the Twitters, the Pinterests, and what have you, will or will not display of you?
Well, I mean, SoundCloud is an amazing, amazing vehicle. And lots of people are recording their own music, they're doing their own mixes, and yet there have been very few artists that have broken out in terms of becoming something that's massively popular. Nothing's getting in their way. I mean, part of the conceit has always been that somehow music companies are holding back all the good music. And now here we have a medium, I can go and listen to anything I want, and yet we still are a long way from where there's going to be massive popularity out of any one song that comes out of SoundCloud.
I think the more things change, more they stay the same. And so the best way to look at the world of content right now is that the power law, the power curve, is fully in effect. And so on the very, very popular side, you have a handful of breakout hits. And when the entire market size of content creators increases, the people who make those great hits actually make more money. Look at Frozen, and look at the platform owners. But at the same time, as the entire power curve grows, your long tail gets longer and longer, and it gets weirder and crappier the farther you go to the right, and that's going to continue no matter what. And so this intermediation, all of it's exactly the same as it was centuries ago.
We are in a world of winner take all. I mean, all you have to do is look at the revenues on the internet, and there is a wide disparity between the massive amount of revenue that Google is taking out of the internet and everybody else. The same thing will continue to be true on significantly large media companies today.
I think this is one of the mirage of the digital. I mean, with the digital, we thought that at some point we might regain the direct relationship with our customer. Instead of selling newspaper in the newsstand and doesn't have any clue of who is buying the paper or who's reading, seeing the advertising and so on, we thought that we could be able to pinpoint exactly who might be the person. The fact of the matter is, today, new intermediaries emerge. I mean, when you take Facebook, for example, Facebook is going to become the main intermediaries. And when I was talking about high traffic websites such as BuzzFeed depends up to 75% of its viewership from Facebook. And I think it's spectacular in terms of number, but it is also extremely dangerous to depend on such temperamental platform. Just a very quick figure. I was discussing a couple of days ago with someone at the Financial Times. He said to me that all of the content the Financial Times is pushing towards its Facebook readers, only 16% reach the news feed of the
16,
and for the Les Echos it's 12, because I checked immediately saying, well, what our status?
You need to do better.
And our study, it was 12. It means that some way, somehow, you will have the algorithm of Facebook, which is going to decide by itself what has to be seen and what has not to be seen.
Facebook is a cruel mistress. I mean, if you look at what's happened, Upworthy, which is an incredibly great site and really extremely well done, but all that had to happen was Facebook to change its algorithm, and then Upworthy's traffic dropped way down. We should expect to see the same thing happen. All that has to happen is a slight change in the algorithm, a slight change in the rules, and we're going to see an entire shift in terms of who's getting viewers and users.
The problem is you have a new breed of intermediaries. If you take, for example, the recent agreement between Dow Jones and Evernote, I think it was quite interesting. It was quite interesting for both, because people from Evernote who take the premium option are able to have access to Dow Jones content, which is a great content. And I must say that as a publisher, if Evernote comes to us, Les Echos, and say, could we have a deal, we most likely have a look. But nevertheless, we are putting another intermediaries in which we need to be extremely careful to take it, to grab it, but in a very careful way, because at some point the next intermediaries will be, for instance, Spotify and Uber is also a perfect example. But you will see Dropbox, you will see Box, you will see Airbnb, which could, for instance, could be a distributor for local content. So at some point, I mean, we will see the rise of a new breed of distributors in our business.
I actually think more distributors is better for media companies.
Sure, the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
It's not battle, right?
Depends on people bidding against each other. for content. I mean, look right now, we have Amazon and Netflix fighting over, for example, the HBO content. If there hadn't been two, it wouldn't have been nearly, the content wouldn't be nearly as valuable. Let Spotify and Pandora, let everybody fight over the content. There'll be more money.
One last thing maybe, as we saw, as years have passed, the price of advertising has gone down, the amount of revenue you get per user, per page, per article, per piece of content has gone down, and yet we see these new initiatives. We see what Pierre Omidyar, ex-founder of eBay, does with First Look Publishing, where he wants to do hard-hitting investigative journalism, what Jill Abramson, ex-New York Times, is doing with her new site that doesn't have a name, where she will pay freelancers $100,000 for a huge piece, a 120,000 character piece, but that has to be super deep, super well researched. Have we crossed the valley of death, that point where there was no way we would be able to fund high quality, actually expensive content? And then we'll leave the stage.
I think you will see less and less people willing to pay for news. You will see basically highly educated people, fairly old people, and fairly affluent people willing to pay for news. And I think it's going to be a problem for democracy because the bulk of the people will be badly informed, I'm afraid.
I think that, I'm not sure I fully agree. I think that consumers they're making a choice towards higher quality content. And it was just a couple years ago, we looked at demand media and every journalist said, I'm going to be out of a job. They've got robots, they've got content farms. Today, all you have to do is look at some sites. So for example, Business Insider, which is publishing 20,000-word articles, and getting millions of views. So I'm actually much more optimistic about the future of high-quality journalism.
I would say for Business Insider, I would say it's something like 5% of their overall content.
Okay.
Ben, Michael, Frederic, thank you so much. That's all the time we have. We will yield the stage to Paul once again. Thanks a lot.